Heels of Success is a series that promotes money matters to smart women. Each month, Zenelia Harris will share money lessons that debunk the typical messaging you hear around women and money. So if you want to gain valuable money tips wrapped around professional advice to help you navigate your personal money and professional journey, tune in to Heels of Success. Hello, I am Zenelia Harris, and I welcome you to the Heels of Success Finance and Stilettos podcast series. I'm Zenelia Harris, author of the book Finance and Stilettos, Money Matters to the Well-Heeled Woman, certified financial planner, former member of the CNBC Financial Advisor Council, and president of Harris & Harris Wealth Management Group, a firm focused on the financial success of professional women who are going through various life transitions such as job change, marriage, widowhood, or retirement. My guest today is Dr. Virletta Bryant. She is a licensed clinical social worker, speaker, and writer. Her academic career spans over 20 years, while she simultaneously worked on research projects and maintained a clinical practice. As a licensed mental health service provider in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, her practice is dedicated to women of color, having a safe, non-judgmental, clinical space to work through their traumas, relationships, and other societal pressures that can negatively impact their quality of life. Let's welcome Dr. Virletta Bryant. So, Dr. Virletta Bryant, it's a pleasure to have you today. And I wanted to build on what I shared in your bio. Can you provide some insights into your professional journey?
Sure, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here having this conversation with you today. So I knew pretty early on that I wanted to do something in the helping service profession. Didn't quite know what that was. I had a very involved mother, and she had me shadowing different people. That was very helpful to see different professions, to see different professionals in different professions. And so to be a part of their day-to-day experience, that was helpful. And I was doing that, I'd say, as early as high school, even junior high. I had already started shadowing people. And then I, as many people do, they look to their parents as models. And, you know, at the time, my mother was working in Child Protective Services, and I asked her if I could shadow her, and she said, of course, come and work with me. And so I had a feeling that this is something I can do, and this is something that I would be good at. That was sort of my first initial, maybe I want to do this. And so she and I, continued to talk, and I told her, I think I want to do this work. It's exciting. It's meaningful. And she said, if you are going to do this work, you want to become a social worker. She said, you want to get your degree in social work because there's a lot of different disciplines that do the same work. However, a licensed social worker is the route you want to go. And so by the time I got to college, I was pretty certain that that's what I wanted to do. I got started in social work, and I went to a historically black university. I had professors that were amazing and became lifelong mentors. And they strongly encouraged me to immediately get my master's, of which I did. So I got my master's in social work, and my very first position, I took a clinical track because I was and have always been interested in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
However, my first position outside of school was in administration. And so I was the executive director of a community center in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 2 years, just a little under 2 years. And I also always knew that I wanted to get into research as well. That was important to me. I felt that for all throughout my schooling, there was a specific story that a narrative that had been told about minorities, specifically African Americans, and it wasn't my day-to-day reality. And I felt that as a researcher, it's one thing when someone comes in and an external entity comes in and tells a story. It's another thing when someone of the community tells a story. You're going to get two different perspectives, both of which are valid. However, the way that America has been structured is that you have gotten more of that external glimpse and far less of the internal glimpse. And so that's where I really felt like I could contribute, and so that meant that I needed to get my PhD. And so I did. I went back to school to the University of Maryland, and I got my PhD, and I started working in academia. I worked both at majority schools, and the majority of my career was at a historically black university as well. And so that was my non-traditional entry into the social work profession. I came out, I did administration. I did some clinical work, a very small amount, but I immediately went into research and education, and I continued to do clinical work because I was teaching clinical courses, and I always wanted to be relevant. And my research area was also clinical. I was looking at depression in African American women. And so, it was very important for me to always keep my hands in clinical work. So I did that for 20 years, actually, before heading out of academia. And I did more administration in a hospital setting, outpatient facility. I did that for 2 years, and I decided that I wanted to open my own practice. And I wanted to combine my loves, which continue to be clinical work, so, mental health therapy, and also I still have my interest in telling a story. And so, bringing in my research, bringing in writing, and also doing clinical work. That's how I got to where I am now.
Right. So what do you feel, as you've gone through this journey of building your career around telling our stories, telling stories of black women, and telling it from the perspective of what you have seen growing up and maybe others can identify with as well? What do you feel has been the biggest life lesson as you've pursued this career journey?
I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to back into it. So no one can tell your story except you. Okay. And now I can back into that. Okay. Going back to undergrad, I, was introduced to some of the foundational reports, and that so much of our current welfare system is built around, like the Moynihan report, that really in some cases demonized black families and made the black women to be problematic figures, right? And has continued that it didn't start with that, but that has been a problem for many years prior, and it has just been something that has continued. And so the difference is that during the 80s, that's when you had the first influx, I'll say, a strong number of black researchers that really began to say, hey, wait a minute, there's more to this story than what's being captured. And so I was introduced to these, seminal reports, and like I said, they didn't represent my family. I came from an intact, middle, upper class black family, and we had values of community. We had values of family, of God. All of those things were very important. And so when I was exposed to, I will say I was sheltered quite a bit. And when I was exposed to what are other people's stories, I began to realize that a lot of the research looks at low-income people of color, and they do it from a snapshot perspective. So they're looking more at what they're seeing in the moment versus what's happened historically that also explains what you're looking at in the moment. And so when I realized that, I wanted to look at, make sure that my research looked at a silent population in the literature, and oftentimes overlooked population, and that is African American women who are middle and upper class. We don't know what their story is, right? Because they get assumed under different groups, minority or women, And so I looked at, from a research perspective, how did my research started by looking at how they utilized faith communities to cope with mental health challenges. And in doing so, what I came to also have to understand and explain was, like any other system, the mental health system has been very racist and has been very it has been damaging to black women, and it has also misunderstood black women. And so, if you think about the place where you go to get help, right, and when you get there, you are misunderstood by the people who are supposed to help you, then what? What's supposed to happen then? And so, it is no secret, nor is it a surprise that, the help-seeking rates of blacks and other minorities continue to be lower than what it is comparatively for their white counterparts. Now, I will say that that is changing with younger generations.
Right.
So, yeah, they're utilizing healthcare professionals and really normalizing it. So that was a part of the story that I told about how difficult it is to be black, to be female. Like that alone is such of a challenge in America, that to be any other and to identify that, it has its own difficulty and challenge, that oftentimes people would prefer to deal with the symptoms versus to acknowledge, hey, I have a problem and I need some help.
Mm.
So that was a part of the story that I researched and contributed to. I think the other thing that I'm speaking broadly, but I also gender roles it was a big part of what my research got into. How women, black women, are caught many times in between roles. They have so many different roles that, there can be role diffusion. And so, really getting a good sense of who they are, because they're more attuned to what they do, and that changes so frequently depending on their role,
Right.
So those were some of the, and continues to be, I looked at this from a research perspective, but now I see it, from a, as I'm sitting in the chair, doing, in my practice, I see it there. So, yeah.
Well, how do you feel that applies to you personally? Like, from your research, what has come out of it as it pertains to you? What have you noticed about yourself? What things are you seeing portrayed in your day-to-day life, if any?
Well, I'd say that my research and really what introduced me to my research, my training, is very much so based in black feminist studies, and it's also coming from a womanist theory. So it's black feminist and womanist theory.
Okay.
And so that's what a lot of my research, so that's the paradigm that I use. And when I became aware of that literature, that was a fit. And so it really helped me understand myself in an entirely different way. And it also helped me understand my environment, because what it really got into was structurally how black women have been historically expected to be the pillars of society, and at the same time, from a historical perspective, they have been the most brutalized people and the most devalued people in America. And so those historical ideations still show up today, right? So, for example, we're seeing this right now, large scale, right, in our in our lives, in our world. But, an example, because you asked me how does this pertain to me. I came from a very Christian family, very conservative religiously, liberal socially. But I came from a very, from a racial perspective, a very progressive family. But from a gender perspective, it was incredibly patriarchal. I was raised in a very patriarchal household. And so I was raised with, I was taught to be fearful of everything, right? And it wasn't, I want to start by saying my parents did the very best that they could, but what the end result was, the emotional tool that was used most frequently to manage me and my femininity was fear, okay? Which means that I came to know myself in fear. I came to know my power to the degree that I did. I didn't come to know it. I came to fear it, right? And so that is a very unique orientation to oneself, right? Also,
So let me go back.
Sure.
So you came to know yourself in fear, but how did that manifest itself? So kind of give me a couple examples of when you had a realization and it was based off of fear.
So these realizations, came at different times in my life. But, like, for example, when I can give you my earliest memory here. My aunt, my parents had left for the evening. My aunt was in town, and she was giving me a bath. And she put bubbles in it, right? And I'd never had bubbles before, right? And I mean, Zenelia, I thought I had died and went to heaven. Like, I had just the time of my life in my bath, right? I was just enjoying it and just really into it. And when my parents would come home, you could hear the door opening, right? And so my aunt was in the bathroom with me. I was almost done, and so she started letting out the water, and my parents came home, right? And I heard the door open, and I looked at her, and I said, we got to get rid of these bubbles. And I started, trying to get the bubbles, out of the bathtub, right?
Right.
And she was like, honey, it's okay. Come on. Here's your towel. Just come on and get out. And I said, we got to get rid of the bubbles. And, my mom came in and was like, hey, how you doing? Everything was fine. Years later, I reflected on that, right? That was a new experience for me, right? As a little kid, anything new was bad. Zenelia, this isn't an example of what you're saying.
Okay.
This is an example of this. So it was fear and it was wrong and right. It was both of those.
Okay.
Right? That's what the tools were that they managed me with. And this is more an example of the wrong and right tool.
Okay.
Right? So that experience as an adult, I realized, it's all three. It's all three. I realized that because wrong and right was such of an important construct in my mind, right? And there was so much fear around being wrong, you know. And so what that meant is that even to this day, when I have a new experience, I am far less likely to be aware of it as exciting or it's an adventure. I'm afraid. I will procrastinate on it. I won't want to touch it. Like those are the, I don't want to be wrong. I got to get it perfect. All of those types of experiences, those early experiences taught me to, and I am now unlearning, obviously, but that's how I approach when I am not reflective. That's how I approach something new, is either with fear or either there's a wrong or there's a right to it.
Would you say perfectionism kicks in as well?
And perfection. I've got it. So if it isn't wrong or right, then I've got to do this right. And of course, it can't be half right. So yes, absolutely.
So now how does that, your upbringing, affect you when it comes to money? Like, so how do you process anything dealing with money based on how you grew up?
So, there was a lot of financial literacy in my home.
Okay.
It was just a part of, it was like sort of incorporated into everyday life, However, that being said, I also got the strong message that it wasn't something I needed to concern myself with. So, like, I realized this once I got to college. College students actually knew their bill. Like, they knew how much they owed. And I was like, y'all know that?
Right.
Your parents aren't taking care of that,
Right.
It was like, and so I had an understanding of finances. However, I also had this distance to finances and me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I was. It was just something that the person in charge handled,
Right.
So it was never really communicated to me, or I did not make the connection that your decisions, you're responsible for them, and so therefore this isn't an academic exercise. Like, apply it to you, and that, if you make the wrong decision, someone is not going to come and bail you out. You know?
Right.
And so I would say that was sort of the upbringing, or those early messages that I received, that money was a tool, and but your life was going to go on, because that's just everything's fine. Everything's fine. You don't have to worry about that kind of thing. Again, I really do think that it came from a well-intentioned place. However, I think a lot of it was still very much so steeped in patriarchy.
Okay. So currently, have you overcome anything that you saw growing up that has been an awakening with you around money?
Yes. I am far more, well, I, started my own practice, and I've been able to not fear money, and I have actually gotten to a place where I have become, I've allowed myself to become comfortable with money. I'll tell you, there's another piece of all of this that runs through this, and that is, with the work that I do, and this is my latest discovery, by the way.
Okay.
So, I really enjoy my work. I am truly, I feel very fortunate to be one of those people that just hands down, I enjoy what I do. And so when I work with people, obviously I am in the caring, helping profession. And our industry has problems with money, right? We conceptualize money to be the enemy at times,
Okay.
So that may show up, in terms of, big business, or, we're nonprofit. We're not supposed, as long as we can pay our bills, it's about the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's always this, we make polar opposites from our caring of people and the bottom line, right? And so I prided myself on trying to avoid that trapping, and I didn't realize that, I had really kind of bought into that until I started my practice. And this is going to sound absolutely bizarre, but I had difficulty billing.
Wow.
I really had difficulty. Like, I would do my work, I'd go in there, I'd have powerful sessions, people were seeing changes in their lives, and I could not bill. I just, it was hard, And so I was writing and reflecting on this, and I happened to mention it to a colleague, and he said, I totally understand what you're talking about, and he said something that I never forgot. He said, I get paid so that I can work. I don't work to get paid. I get paid so that I can work. And since that time, there has just been like a shift with me where I feel very comfortable with going through, those procedures. I'm not actively avoiding them, but it's like, okay, this is just, it's another task. It's not, I don't have these layers on top of it anymore, So, yeah, that's sort of my journey with money. I also got someone to assist because it's still not what I went to school for. It's still not what I like to do. So,
right. No, but I think that that realization is pretty powerful, because a lot of times I don't think that that's just your profession. I don't think it's just you. I think it's something that a lot of women have to combat within themselves about getting paid, first of all, and then getting paid what they're worth.
Yes.
And
that is another issue. Yeah.
Right. So I think that it's just so interesting, because as I listen to your story and I relate to my own story, I see that. I can see myself in your story, and I can see some of the things that and definitely identify with how you grew up. Even though my family dynamics were a little different. I still grew up from a religious perspective, in a very patriarchal environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add the money on top of it, and you're like, well, hey, my significant other is supposed to be the one that handles that.
Yes.
But yet my personal interest was in money. And so I kind of felt like, from a religious perspective, like I kind of clashed with the environment that I grew up in, because I wanted to be the one to handle the money, to come up with the strategy for the money. And I didn't feel as though it was received and would be accepted. And so, therefore, I felt isolated and disjointed from the environment I grew up with religiously, my religious environment.
Yes. Yes. I totally can understand. I can totally understand that. And, you know, I don't think our stories are uncommon. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with us really, I think that there's some things that have been missing from these religious faith communities, where, again, if you talk about the narrative, it is regulated by leadership, and leadership has always been male-dominated. And so it is I would even say within the last 10 years, we're seeing an influx of women. Now, the leadership has been male-dominated, but the pew has been very much so majority, female. And so now we're beginning to see, women in leadership positions. And so I think this is an exciting time, because in these very fundamental ways, I think for the first time that there's an opportunity for there to be a broader message, same principles, right? But a broader message that's far more inclusive to really its congregants.
Right. So, based on what you see in your practice and what you experience in your life, what are some considerations women should do to take care of themselves and put themselves first?
I'm going to tell you, when I start working with someone, I always start with a little phone consult, and I contacted the person. We caught up with each other, and I identified myself, and this person said, "I just moved to the area. I've got my dentist, I've got my doctor, and I'm looking for my therapist." I love it. We've got to prioritize health and wellness, right? This is a very tough time to be alive. I think it's also, as with any crisis, it's a time of great opportunity.
Right.
If we're in a space to be able to see it and know when to act on it, right? So that being said, you can't do that if you are not physically well, if you are not mentally well, or if you are not financially healthy. Those things go together. So, if we are talking about what women should prioritize themselves.
Right.
And prioritize themselves holistically. You know?
Okay, I'm going to have to snap to that. Snap, snap.
So that means to me, you know, breathing intentionally, you know, taking some time out every day to be still and to connect your physical with your mental. And what connects your physical and mental selves is your breath. So breathing, and also exercising, drinking water. I mean, just all of the things that we do that can improve the quality of our lives, particularly if we do it consistently. So that to me is a priority. I also think that it is a priority to remain connected. Right now with COVID-19, it is very easy to isolate, and you have to actively find safe ways to connect with people. So some of that will be virtual, but if you can, you know, find a safe way to, you know, maybe take a socially distanced walk with someone, or either walk with someone who's in your pod or who you're already quarantining, whatever the case may be, you know. Find a way to continue to connect to humans, because we really are social creatures, and it's necessary. And then I also would say that it's important to prioritize our existence. And so, you know, whatever it is that makes you feel wholly human, you know, whether that is, well, let me say this, whatever it is that makes you feel wholly human, or if there is anything that takes away from your human experience, this is not the time to sit back and be silent about it. Wow. It never was the time, right? But it's certainly not the time now. So we need to be present to ourselves individually. We also need to make sure that we remain connected to others, right? And we need to be very engaged in our larger, broader community. It is so easy to avoid confusion and you know, messaging that is attacks on our identities, right? It's easy to go on with our day-to-day living, and yet so detrimental, you know? So we need to be voting. That's a form of engagement, you know? We need to be concerned about our physical environment. That's a form of engagement. This time, for me, what I am most aware of, if there is anything that is at the forefront of my mind, you know, we need to be engaged at multiple levels. Multiple levels.
I agree. So it's interesting because I learned of an organization called Girl Trek. Have you heard of them before?
I have.
And the power behind what they're doing, which is getting black women and other women of color to put themselves first by walking. I think he started off with walking. and taking care of our physical beings so that we can also take care of our mental beings. And I have found so much power in what they're doing. I've participated in a couple of events that they've done, virtual events that they've done, and what you're saying so aligns with their messaging.
Yes, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just was like, I'm just, agreeing with everything that you're saying, and this movement of black women being or focusing on themselves, because a lot of times we haven't been allowed to do that.
Absolutely. And walking is one of the most beautiful ways that we can do it, because if you think about it, look at a baby who's going from infancy to toddler, right? From a developmental perspective, one of the largest developmental stages is from all fours to being able to walk with 2 feet. Right? And so it takes a lot of concentration because it requires you to use both sides of your brain. Okay? And so when someone, fast forward, a child, an adult, begins to walk, right, they are doing 2 things. They are breathing, so you are oxygenating, right? What is it that connects mind and body? Oxygen, breath, right? And walking helps you to recalibrate mentally, spiritually, and physically, because you're utilizing both sides of your brain and you're utilizing both sides of your body at the same time. One of the most powerful things you can do is put one foot in front of the other. Right.
Wow. So this has been such a fruitful conversation, awakening a lot of, I guess for me it's also an awakening, in that as I hear your story, and I think of the many stories that I've heard over the years, I see so much connection between us as women, especially, and that is regardless of race.
Yes.
And what I feel is so powerful is when we open up and really connect our stories, and by sharing our stories, really connect by sharing our stories, that's where you see how, in a lot of ways, our journeys are intertwined.
Absolutely.
So I so appreciate the fact that you've shared so much insight. How can people reach out to you? How can they connect with you further?
Oh, so I am at Dr. Bryant at theartofhealingcenter.com.
Thank you.
So that's dr.bryant at theartofhealingcenter.com.
Great. I am so glad to have you on today, and I appreciate you sharing such great insight. Thank you.
Thank you.